I, 32 male, am getting married to my fiancée, Deborah, 31 female, next month. We have been together for 2 years, and I just asked her to marry me last month. I'm head over heels for this wonderful woman and can't wait to spend the rest of my life with her. We come from very different backgrounds. I grew up in a working-class family, and I'm the middle child among my 2 siblings. We always had to work hard, living paycheck to paycheck every month. Deborah, on the other hand, had a much more comfortable upbringing. Her dad was a successful businessman, so he could provide her with everything. She was always surrounded by wealthy kids who threw extravagant parties and events. I put in a lot of effort to work my way through college and eventually landed a job at a prestigious company. My parents were truly proud of how I had built my life without ever depending on them to provide me with financial assistance. When Deborah and I met for the first time, it was at a mutual friend's party. Although we knew we were worlds apart, we still had an instant connection. We started going on dates, taking the time to truly understand each other, and with each passing day, we fell head over heels for one another. Once we started seriously dating, Deborah eventually invited me to one of her family's dinners so she could formally introduce me to her parents. That's when I had the pleasure of meeting her dad, John, a successful businessman, and her mom, Maggie, who was a dedicated stay-at-home mom, for the first time. John seemed to appreciate the effort I had put into building my life. Maggie, on the other hand, didn't seem to take a liking to me. It was quite evident that she looked down on my upbringing, and I didn't fit her expectations for the kind of son-in-law she had in mind. Her disapproval of me was far from subtle. It was painfully evident. She didn't hold back in making it clear that her only child deserved someone she considered better than me. She would often cut me off in conversations, and her disapproving glances spoke volumes, making it a challenging and awkward situation to navigate. In contrast, my parents couldn't have been more welcoming to Deborah. They embraced her with open arms, and my brothers took an instant liking to her. They would playfully tease her, telling her that she still had time to run away and escape from me, all in good fun, of course. It was heartwarming to see my family so supportive and accepting of our relationship. As time went on, I did my best to bridge the gap with Maggie, hoping to win her over. I understood that our different backgrounds and expectations might take her some time to reconcile. However, our interactions continued to remain strained, and I could sense her disapproval lingering in the background. Despite this challenge, Deborah and I focused on building our own world together, filled with love, understanding, and shared dreams. We were committed to nurturing our relationship even in the midst of these familial disparities. We held on to the hope that, as time went by, Maggie might eventually come to accept and embrace me. Sadly, a year ago, John passed away from a heart attack suddenly. While he left behind substantial wealth, there were also unexpected debts that needed to be settled. Maggie had to make the difficult decision to sell her house and their car to cover these financial obligations when the bank came calling. Since then, she had to move in with us as she had nowhere else to go and has been living with us for the past 6 months. I didn't really mind having her live with us, as I understood that she was going through a difficult time. She had just lost her husband. I tried my best to make her stay as comfortable as possible, but Maggie always found reasons to complain about around the house. Just for context, Deborah and I have always shared our responsibilities equally since we started living together. Given our careers, we take turns handling tasks like cooking, cleaning, and doing the laundry as part of our routine. It's a way for us to balance our busy lives and support each other in every aspect. My parents had taught me to be independent from a very young age, so I love doing my share of the household work. Maggie absolutely despised this and would make her disapproval obvious. Throughout her stay, she has made subtle comments about how a man doesn't belong in the kitchen, or a man shouldn't be doing household work. Usually I don't take it to heart, and I ignore it as much as possible, but over time, her comments have become progressively more hurtful and insensitive. I have talked to Deborah regarding this, and she agrees that her mother's behavior has been very difficult and hostile. Now, coming on to the incident, I was recently promoted at work, hence I wanted to do something special to celebrate this milestone with our family and friends. We decided to host a grand event, inviting our close ones. My to-be Mill also extended invitations to some of her rich friends, whom she hadn't seen for a while, particularly after her husband's passing. While I'm not one to flaunt things, I entrusted Deborah with the planning, and she went all out with the party preparations. On the day of the celebration, our house looked great. As the guests started arriving, Maggie seemed to be having a good time reconnecting with her old friends. My fiancé and I were busy hosting our own friends and relatives. As the party was in full swing and the guests mingled and enjoyed the festivities, I couldn't help but notice that my to-be Mill's behavior had taken a turn for the worse. She had a few too many drinks, and her comments started to get more and more inappropriate. She was bragging about how expensive everything around the house was, particularly the decorations and the food, in front of her friends. It was becoming increasingly uncomfortable, and I could see that some of our guests were taken aback by her behavior. My fiancé and I exchanged worried glances, unsure of how to handle the situation. We attempted to stay cool, as we knew Maggie had been drinking a lot since the morning. At one point, we ran out of wine, so I dashed to the nearby liquor store. When I got back home, I found my fiancée outside on the lawn, enjoying her time with our relatives. I served them the drinks and then headed back inside to check on the rest of our guests. That's when I heard my mother-in-law loudly laughing as she chatted with her friends. I was about to enter the room when I overheard Maggie mentioning my recent job promotion to her friends. She went on to describe how she had been living at our place for several months rent-free, all because I was a naive person. She laughed as she continued to say that she had finally landed a SIMP son-in-law, and pointed out that I had been covering her expenses throughout this time while she lived rent-free in my house. Her words stung, and I was taken aback by what she was saying. Her friends were all laughing loudly at my expense. She then went on to say that she was set for the rest of her life now that Deborah was going to marry me in a few months. My emotions were in turmoil, and I struggled with how to handle the situation. It was disheartening to hear these derogatory comments coming from someone whom I considered family, someone I had tried my best to welcome and support during a difficult time in her life. As I stood there in the hallway, grappling with a mix of anger, disappointment, and a sense of betrayal, I contemplated whether to confront her or wait for a more suitable moment to talk about this. My to-be Mill then told her friends that because I came from a low-income family, I would continue to be a hard worker for her and that she had nothing to worry about. At that moment, I couldn't hear her talk that way any longer and made a decision to walk into the room and confront her right then and there. I wanted to make it clear to her that she wouldn't be able to take advantage of me anymore. With a wine bottle in hand, I walked into the room, and everyone fell into an awkward silence when they noticed my sudden arrival. Maggie's laughter ceased, and her expression shifted from surprise to a mixture of discomfort and concern. She was worried that I might have overheard the conversation. Pouring wine for everyone and placing the bottle down, I faced Maggie and began to speak. "Maggie, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with your friends. I stood there for a good 5 minutes listening to you talk about how you've used my perceived naivety to your advantage. I want to make it clear that I welcomed you into my house with open arms and tried to support you during a difficult time, particularly because you had just lost your husband. However, making hurtful comments like this in front of our family and friends and laughing at my expense is not acceptable." The room remained tense, with a heavy silence weighing down on all of us. I could see that Maggie was taken aback by the directness of my words, and her friends seemed equally uncomfortable. Just as the tension was at its peak, my fiancée walked into the room, a puzzled expression on her face as she tried to understand what was happening. As I stood in the middle of the room with Deborah now in the room, I went on to explain to her what her mother had been telling people about me. Deborah's eyes widened in shock as she tried to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Maggie's expression shifted from shock to embarrassment. I knew I wouldn't be able to forgive her for the way she had spoken about me. I asked Maggie to immediately leave my house. Maggie's eyes widened as she began to frantically protest, knowing that she had nowhere else to go. Deborah remained quiet as she understood how humiliated I had felt because of her mother. I remained resolute in my decision, emphasizing that I could no longer trust my to-be Mill to be living with us. I suggested she could find accommodation with one of her wealthy friends who had joined the party and were evidently relishing and laughing at my expense just minutes ago. Maggie looked around the room helplessly as her friends avoided eye contact, and I couldn't help but smirk. I had reached my breaking point and was no longer willing to be used and taken advantage of. In that tense moment, Deborah, who had been taken aback by the unfolding drama, finally spoke up. She addressed her mother with a mix of disappointment and determination. "Mom, you've put us in an incredibly uncomfortable situation with your behavior today. We've always tried to support you, but this kind of treatment towards my fiancé is unacceptable." Maggie, now caught between her daughter's disapproval and her own embarrassing behavior, began to realize the gravity of the situation. She had no easy way out and attempted to apologize, but I wasn't willing to be manipulated any longer. Still seething in anger and disappointment, I walked out of the room. The party soon ended, and my to-be Mill apparently left to stay at one of her relatives' places. Since the incident, I've been receiving messages from people with a variety of reactions. Most of the guests seem to support my decision to stand up for myself. But there are some family members from my fiancé's side who are telling Deborah that what I did was wrong and that I should not have humiliated her mother like that. My parents, who were present at the party, supported me 100% and had my back. The situation has caused a divide between our families, and the mixed opinions are adding to the tension. So I wanted to post here so I could get an unbiased opinion. Am I the a-hole for confronting my to-be Mill in front of everyone after I caught her making fun of me and letting her know that she won't be able to leech off? Me? Update 1. Thanks to everyone for your feedback on my last post. Many folks have suggested that this incident should serve as an eye-opener to the kind of family I would be marrying into. I have received suggestions that I should get a prenup with my fiancé before we get married, which I honestly never really thought about before. But after the recent incident, I'm seriously considering it. That day, after the party ended, my fiancé and I had a lengthy conversation to discuss everything. While my fiancé is completely on my side, it's hard to deny that my trust has been shaken. It's not her fault, but I'm worried about her family and how easily they could manipulate me in the future. Many comments have pointed out that my mother-in-law's subtle, mean comments for all these months were a form of emotional abuse, and I'm starting to see it that way too. I do not wish to have her in my life anymore. 2 days after Maggie left, she called my wife, who chose not to answer, so she sent me an angry text that read, "Adam, are you happy now that you've separated me from my daughter? I've already lost my husband, and now I'm losing my daughter because of you. Yes, I used you, but isn't that what a son-in-law should do? Pay for his to-be mother-in-law's expenses? You could have bought me a new place when I lost my house, but instead you forced me to live with you. You have more than enough to take care of my daughter, so it wouldn't hurt you to take care of me too." Her message left me seething with anger, and it was evident she felt no remorse for her derogatory remarks in front of her friends. I shared the message with Deborah, who promptly assured me she would address the situation and advised me to block her mother's number. It remains to be seen what happens next, but I feel emotionally exhausted dealing with this ongoing drama. Her mother's persistent unkindness towards me for no apparent reason, coupled with her unwarranted financial expectations, is really taking a toll on me. Update 2. Okay everyone, here's the update you all have been waiting for. In the days that follow, Deborah continued to handle her mother's attempts at contact. She firmly explained to her mother that the situation had become untenable and that she had crossed a line. Deborah offered to help her mother find suitable accommodations, but emphasized that the living arrangement with us had reached its limit. Maggie's responses ranged from anger to pleading. She continued to accuse me of tearing her family apart and causing her more pain during an already difficult time. I had blocked her, so fortunately she had no way to reach out to me. As our wedding was fast approaching, I shared my thoughts and fears with Deborah, and she took it surprisingly well. My fiancé agreed that I wasn't wrong to have those fears in my head and told me that she was ready to sign a prenup so I wouldn't feel restless and uncomfortable. I was taken aback by how understanding she was, and I couldn't help but feel guilty for having any negative thoughts about her, all because of her mother's actions. After that conversation, I felt much better about our relationship. We were starting to regain a sense of normalcy when Maggie unexpectedly showed up at our doorstep a few days later without any warning. I was alone at home when I heard the doorbell ring. She'd come to confront me, and her accusations and anger poured out. When I welcomed her inside to sit, Maggie claimed that I had ruined her relationship with her daughter forever, laying the blame squarely on my shoulders. Her words were filled with frustration and resentment. You think you can just control everything, don't you?" she exclaimed. "You've taken my daughter away from me, and now you're trying to push me out of her life. This is my family too, and you can't just dictate what happens here." As the argument escalated, her accusations became more personal and cutting. She accused me of isolating her from Deborah and said that she deserved to be living with her daughter. I took a deep breath, trying to remain composed in the face of her accusations, and responded, "Maggie, this isn't about pushing you away. It's about preserving the peace and well-being of our family. Your actions and words have made it challenging to maintain a healthy environment here. I'm not trying to isolate you, I'm trying to set boundaries." I continued, "Deborah and I deserve to have a loving, supportive, and peaceful home. It's not about control, it's about ensuring that our relationship is respected and protected." At that point, thankfully, my wife returned from the grocery store, and I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that she could handle her mother better. She was visibly shocked to find her mother standing inside our house. Hurrying to my side, she asked if I was okay, concern evident in her eyes. I nodded, morbidly relieved to have her presence beside me. Maggie, now directing her attention toward her daughter, accused me of trying to be controlling of her life. She said that she wouldn't let me kick her out of the house, and that she planned to live here if her daughter was going to be here. She accused me of trying to divide the family apart since her husband had passed away. Deborah seemed pissed as she explained to her mother that, after what she had spoken about me, she couldn't just expect me to forget about it. She reminded Maggie that she never even apologized to me for the harsh words she had spoken in front of the guests at a party that I had thrown in my house. Deborah reiterated to her mother that she was not entitled to live in my house just because Deborah was going to marry me. Maggie was displeased seeing her daughter support me, and it only seemed to escalate her anger. The room was charged with emotions, and I didn't want this to escalate further, so I asked Maggie to leave immediately. Otherwise, I would call the police. Maggie's expression displayed a mixture of frustration and resignation, as she clearly wanted to argue about this further, but thankfully, she decided to leave. After this incident, I am planning to take some space from Deborah and her family. I love her a lot, but I don't want to be stuck in a toxic environment like this forever. I guess I need to take some time to rethink our future. Update 3. It's been 4 months since my last update, and I know it's been a long time, but here I am. I am thrilled to share that Deborah and I are now happily married. Our wedding day went off without a hitch, and it was a beautiful celebration of our love and commitment to each other. We were surrounded by our closest family and friends, and the day was filled with joy and cherished memories. I know I had mentioned last time that I was a bit unsure about marrying her, but after some time off alone, I realized that she was nothing like her mother. As we had discussed before our marriage, Deborah did sign a prenuptial agreement, which gave us both peace of mind. It was a decision that helped ensure that our relationship was built on trust, respect, and a mutual understanding of our responsibilities. One notable absence on our special day was Maggie, our mother-in-law. We did invite her, as I didn't want my wife to not invite her only living parent to witness our wedding. But Maggie chose not to attend the wedding. Her anger and resentment towards me from the earlier conflicts, which led to her leaving our home permanently, still lingered. I couldn't help but feel sad for Deborah, who had to navigate the difficult decision of having her mother absent on such an important occasion. Nonetheless, our wedding was a day filled with love and happiness. We were grateful for the support of our loved ones who celebrated the beginning of our journey as a married couple. In the days following our wedding, Deborah and I have settled into our married life, cherishing the moments we shared together and planning for our future. We are excited about the possibilities that lie ahead, and we know that our love will guide us through any challenges we might face. Update 4. Married life has been going great so far. Deborah and I have been relishing every moment of our life together as a married couple. We found joy in the little things, from lazy Sunday mornings with breakfast in bed to sitting at home and reading books together. Our love has continued to grow, and we've become even more in sync with each other. We have embraced the various responsibilities that come with marriage rather smoothly. Recently, I have taken a significant step in my journey toward personal growth and family healing. Thanks to everyone's advice, I decided to start therapy, and it has been a transformative experience. Therapy has provided me with the tools to better understand and express myself and the dynamics within our family. It has allowed me to address the emotional wounds and challenges that I have faced, especially in my relationship with my mother-in-law. With the guidance of my therapist, I have been able to communicate more effectively with my wife and work on building a stronger and more communicative relationship. Once I felt I was ready, we tried to reach out to Maggie, hoping to mend the rift that had developed between us. While it wasn't easy for me to reach out, I knew how much Deborah loved her mother, and I didn't want her to live her life without being in contact with her only remaining parent. We decided to invite Maggie to our home for dinner so we could all talk properly. Maggie had been staying at various relatives' places since the incident, and when Deborah first reached out with a dinner invitation, it took her by surprise. She seemed hesitant but also intrigued by the opportunity to reconnect with her daughter. She arrived at our home, and we cautiously began with small talk to catch up on each other's lives. Deborah was the first to break the ice, expressing her desire to see a healthier relationship between me and Maggie. She shared how much she loved both of us and wanted to see us get along. Hearing this, Maggie slowly admitted that her actions had been fueled by a sense of loss and uncertainty after her husband's passing, and that she had let those emotions cloud her judgment. She apologized to me for the way she had behaved and expressed that she didn't understand at first how much she had hurt me. I could see that she seemed genuinely sorry about the incident. The conversation continued, delving into the hurt feelings on both sides, the misunderstandings that had occurred, and the steps that could be taken to mend the rift. It was an emotional and honest discussion marked by tears and heartfelt apologies. Deborah played a crucial role in facilitating the conversation, acting as a bridge between me and her mother. By the end of the evening, amidst a wonderful dinner, there was a sense of relief and optimism in the room. While the wounds of the past hadn't completely healed, the foundation for reconciliation had been laid. It was a promising start on the journey toward rebuilding the bonds that had been strained for so long. Since the evening, we have continued to meet Maggie during other family events, and there is no longer any awkwardness. Our relationship has gradually improved. Although I will never feel comfortable enough for her to live with us again, I remain patient and understanding, knowing that healing will take time. Story 2. My ex-husband divorced me over a misunderstanding, and 9 years later, he showed up wanting a second chance after learning the truth. I, 38 female, got divorced from my ex-husband, Nick, 40 male, almost 9 years ago. We'd been married for 3 years and he'd been a good husband, but due to a huge misunderstanding, he left me and then served me with divorce papers a few days later. He didn't even give me a chance to explain, and so he never found out the truth. I was so hurt by the fact that he decided he wanted to leave so fast that I didn't contest the divorce either and let him go. I used to be a housewife then. One day, Nick came back home to find my ex-boyfriend, Joe 38 male, in the house with me, and he turned around and left without a word. The three of us knew each other from college, and Joe and I had dated for just 3 months before I realized I had feelings for Nick. Joe had been visiting to invite me and Nick to his wedding that was going to take place in a few months, and that was it. Nothing weird or suspicious was going to happen. I'd never do that to someone else. But Nick just assumed the worst and left without a word. I tried to call after him and stop him, but he drove away as fast as he could and even blocked me everywhere, so I couldn't get to him and explain what was going on. I didn't even know where he was and spent the next 2 days sobbing and panicking. Joe had also tried to get through to Nick to explain, but even he'd been blocked. I was devastated, but believed that once his anger cooled off, Nick would come back, and I'd explain everything to him so that we could resume our normal lives once more. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and a few days later, he filed for divorce. I was devastated by that and didn't know what to do. I just needed a chance to explain everything to him, but he didn't think I was worthy of it, and so with a heavy heart, I decided not to fight for my marriage anymore and let him go. I didn't contest the divorce. Once the proceedings started, I packed my stuff up and moved in with a friend for a while until I got a job and could afford a place of my own. It took a while, but I got my life back on track and didn't give myself any time to sit around and be depressed about what was happening. I was angry about Nick's behavior and always will be. I deserved a second chance, or at least the chance to explain, but even after so many years of being together, he didn't think I deserved it. I felt betrayed and hurt, but I knew I had to look out for myself now. So I got a job and eventually moved into an apartment of my own as well. By then, my divorce had been finalized, and even though I didn't get much out of it, I was content. I just wanted to move on with my life, and that's what I was doing. I also attended Joe's wedding a month after my own divorce and had a blast reconnecting with my old friends from college. Nick had skipped it, just as I'd expected, and most people were shocked to learn that Nick and I had parted ways. All of them had expected us to stay together forever, as had I, but life had other plans. Attending Joe's wedding turned out to be the best damn decision I'd ever made, though, because there I met Chris 40 male, the man I'm currently married to and even have a daughter with. We had a conversation at Joe's wedding, and I did feel sparks instantly, but I held back since I'd just been through a divorce and wanted to work on myself before I rushed into anything else. I wanted a break from men, so I exchanged numbers with him but didn't text for a while. A year later, I was finally in a better place mentally and felt ready to date. As luck would have it, I ran into Chris yet again at a work event since we work in the same field, and I finally agreed to go out on a date with him. 2 years later, we were getting married, and another year in, we even had a daughter who's almost 5 years old now. A lot of time has passed since my divorce with Nick, and I'm a brand new person now, so you can imagine my shock when, after all this time, Nick shows up at my doorstep out of the blue. That happened a few days ago, and I'm still reeling from the shock of it all. I don't know how he found me, and neither did I bother to find out later on because I truly couldn't care less. It was the weekend, so my husband and I were both at home with our daughter when the bell rang. I was stunned when I saw Nick standing outside with a bouquet of roses and smiling as if nothing had happened. Before I could even process what was happening, he started talking and explained that a few weeks ago, he'd learned from a friend that Joe was married to a different woman, and not me, and he'd finally realized that he'd overreacted back then. He said he wanted to give us a second chance, and so he was back here asking for forgiveness for whatever he'd done. I had no idea what to say to him. I mean, it was ridiculous enough that he divorced me over a misunderstanding all those years back without bothering to find out the truth. But now he was back after 9 whole years of no contact, believing that he could just talk his way back into my life and get a second chance just like that, when he himself had denied me that very second chance. Fat chance of that happening. He kept talking while I silently stared at him, trying to think of what to do next. I so desperately wanted to shut the door in his face, but that just wouldn't be humiliating enough. So I decided to do something a lot more insulting. I told him to wait right there and went back to the living room, where my husband and my daughter were sitting, waiting for me to come back. I didn't have time to explain, so I just lifted my daughter in my arms and told Chris to follow me to the front door. You can imagine what happened after that. Nick was horrified when he saw me walk towards him with my daughter in my arms and my husband behind me. I smiled at him and told him that he was a tad bit too late to ask for a second chance now and asked him to get out. After a second of silence, he turned around, ran to his car without another word, and drove away. I was really pleased with myself, and I finally felt like I got the closure I'd been looking for all those years ago. Once he was gone, I sat Chris down, and when I told him that it was Nick and what he'd said to me, we ended up having a good laugh over it. He was in over his head if he had really believed that I was just going to take him back, No questions asked after what he'd done to me 9 years ago. I didn't even know why he thought it would be a good idea to just spring this surprise on me without doing his own research first. One look at any of my social media accounts would tell him that I was now married and even had a daughter. But I guess he couldn't get through since I have private accounts everywhere. Even then, he could have asked our old friends and tried to find out what I was up to. Chris believes that he's so self-centered that he must have assumed that I would have waited around for him after he'd left, hoping that he'd come back someday. And it sounds like a pretty spot-on assessment of his character, even though Chris has never even had a conversation with Nick. It's been a few days since then, and I thought that he'd leave me alone after what had happened. But this morning, he sent me a message on Facebook from a new account and said that he was incredibly hurt by what I'd done. He genuinely wanted to apologize to me for what he'd done in the past, but I'd made a mockery out of the whole thing. He still feels sorry for what he did, but he also thinks that I owe him an apology as well for trying to humiliate him. AITA for what I did to Nick? Update 1, so I decided not to reply to Nick's message. He really didn't deserve even an ounce of my sympathy or forgiveness, let alone an apology. My husband was right. He definitely just assumed that I'd still be waiting for him and would readily accept him once he was finally ready to come back. He'd always been a self-centered guy, and sadly, I'd overlooked all the red flags before I got married to him. They were always there. He didn't suddenly change overnight. But sadly, I was too blinded by my love for him to see him for what he truly was. Once we got together, he'd always make it very awkward and uncomfortable for me to be around any other guy, even if we were just friends. He wouldn't say it straight to my face, but he'd taunt me about it later and make a huge deal out of it. So I started avoiding my male friends altogether and would only speak to them in Nick's presence and never without him. He also told me to quit my job and be a housewife because his job required him to spend long hours at the office. So he wanted our house to be ready for him when he came back, and he said that he didn't trust anyone else to make sure of that other than me. I was honored back then, so I readily quit my well-paying job to be the perfect housewife for him. And despite all that I gave up for him, he didn't even give me a chance to explain my side. I'd always felt that Nick was especially jealous of Joe, given the fact that he was my first boyfriend in college, and I was with him before Nick. So he'd be extra possessive of me when it came to Joe. He never had a reason to, though, since I was always loyal to him and would never even imagine cheating on anyone. But he clearly didn't think that highly of me. After our divorce, I was really torn up, and it took me a long time to pull myself together and give love a second chance. A lot of you guys have been saying that I jumped from one relationship into another, and maybe it's true. I don't know. I can't exactly deny it because getting into a relationship just a year after a divorce might be too quick for some people. But I'm glad that I did it. I took that leap of faith, and that's why I have the best husband and a beautiful daughter today. So I'd say that I'm pretty content with how my life has turned out. I'm not going to apologize to Nick, but I guess I do owe him a thanks at the very least, since if he hadn't left me, then I might still have been stuck in an unhappy marriage. Update 2. Okay, so I found out a couple more things about Nick. Apparently, the reason he hadn't known anything about my life was because he deleted all his social media, and for the past few years, he'd been living in Seoul for work. So, he lost touch with his old friends from college as well. He'd moved back just a month ago and had gotten in touch with a friend of his who wasn't really close with me, so he didn't know about my marriage. But he did know about Joe's, which is all that he told Nick, and that's how he landed up on my doorstep. It's still bizarre that he chose to approach me even after almost a decade of not being in touch, but whatever, I'm over it now. He hasn't texted me after I ignored his message, and I don't think he will either. I also told Joe about what had happened, and even he was shocked at the audacity that Nick had, showing up without any warning and expecting me to just take him back, and even demanding an apology from me, because I decided to insult him the same way he'd insulted me. My daughter did ask me who that man was, but I didn't tell her the truth because she doesn't need to know. I told her he just had the wrong address, and that seemed to pacify her, so she didn't ask about it further. I don't think I'm ever going to tell her unless she somehow finds out on her own, which feels really unlikely. Update 3. Nick texted me again after almost a week of no contact. I guess I'd forgotten to block him, which was kind of silly on my part, but I'm really busy with work, so I'm not beating myself up about it. Coming to the text, he said that he still has a lot of things that he wants to talk about and wants to meet me. He also said that he doesn't mind that I have a husband and a daughter and would still like to give our relationship another shot because he knows that that's what I want as well, deep down. He's insinuating that I'd be down to cheat on my husband with him, basically, which is just so ironic because isn't that exactly what he left me for 9 years back? I was speechless when I saw that text because it was so disgusting. I couldn't believe that he even had the audacity to send the text to me and thought that I'd entertain it in any way. I warned him to leave me alone and then blocked his number because I sure as hell don't need this man back in my life. It's disgusting the way he can't see beyond himself. I don't understand why he still believes that I have any feelings for him at all apart from hatred, because I think I made it very clear when he came to visit me that I didn't care for him anymore, and my family is all that matters to me now. He should have just taken the hint and left me alone instead of showing me how low he can go and what a creep he is. It's making me feel so icky to even speak about this. At least now he's blocked, and whatever disgusting message he decides to send me next, I won't have to see it. I'm trying to erase the memory of the first one from my head as well, to be honest. It's just gross. Update 4. It's pretty ridiculous how some of you guys are accusing me of still being into Nick. No, I'm not into him, but I do hate him. Which I think is pretty freaking natural since I was literally married to this guy before he abandoned me. And of course, I told Chris about that text. I'm not a cheater and never have been, so I definitely would share something like that with my husband. It goes without saying that I love him more than anything in the world, and I wouldn't do anything that would put my marriage in danger. The only reason I'd even open the door to Nick in the first place is that I have a bad habit of not checking who's out there, especially when my husband's home. I'm working on it. But that being said, I would never knowingly let Nick back into my life. I don't want him back in my life either, so it's sickening that people are accusing me of doing that. I hope this clears things up. Update 5. So, Nick dropped by again, and I didn't open the door this time without checking who it was first. Luckily, my daughter was out with my husband to meet his parents, and I was supposed to accompany them, but I got caught up with work. When I realized it was Nick standing out there, I told him through the door that he needed to leave and that he wasn't welcome here anymore. I thought I'd made myself pretty clear when I said that, and it meant that he was supposed to leave, but he refused to listen. He told me that he was in town just for a couple more weeks, and then he'd be in another country. I was confused as to why he was telling me this, since I didn't really care, but then he said that this would be convenient for us. He said that I didn't need to fight it anymore, and that we could finally get together now. I couldn't believe that he was standing right outside my house and asking me to cheat on my husband. I was appalled and disgusted and immediately said that he had 3 seconds to leave or else I'd call the police. Once again, he didn't take it seriously and decided to stay, so I ended up calling the police, and they had to take him away. I'm glad my daughter wasn't there to witness it, but I did call my husband up immediately. Chris came back within half an hour and made sure I was all right. I was okay, just a little shaken by what had happened. I don't even know how he'd found out where I lived. The friend who told him about Joe being married to someone else wasn't even close enough to me to know that I was married, let alone know where I live. So it couldn't have been him. But now I'm feeling weird and uncomfortable in my own home, and I hate it. I'm lucky that he's here only for a few more weeks, and I'm counting on that to make him stay away. It isn't even myself that I'm worried about the most, it's my daughter. I'm not saying that he'd put us in danger, he doesn't seem psycho yet, but I surely wouldn't put it past him. Even today, while I was hiding out in the living room and waiting for the cops to arrive, he was begging me to give him one chance. He thought I was bluffing about the phone call and didn't buy it, even though he'd heard me reporting him on the call. I think that's just him being super delusional right now. My husband and I are considering amping up the security, and we're going to speak to his uncle, who works in the police, and get his advice on what to do next because this just took a super weird and creepy turn. I don't want to stick around to find out what he does next. Update 6. I think I found out how Nick traced me. I talked to a couple of my college friends, and one of them happened to give out my address to Nick's old friend. She apologized to me several times when I told her what had happened, and said that she'd forgotten to ask me first. I'm obviously still pissed about it because her forgetfulness has led to a crapload of problems for me now. I'm taking a breather from this woman because what she'd done was immensely stupid. You don't just give out people's addresses without asking them first. I think even second graders would know something as basic as that. I haven't heard from Nick after he was escorted off our property by the police, but we're still considering moving just in case he was lying about being here for only a few more weeks. Chris and I don't want to risk anything, especially since our daughter goes to school nearby, and I'm feeling incredibly paranoid and anxious about how this situation has turned out. So, we're still considering a move, and the only thing holding us back, ironically, is our daughter. She loves our home and has been very upset ever since she learned that we might have to leave. So, any tips on how to deal with this are welcome. Until then, we're just trying to figure out a way to make this work for us right now without compromising on our safety. Update 7. Nick has moved to Canada, and I've confirmed it with multiple people, so I know he's gone for sure. He's back on social media again, so that's how they all know what he's up to. He had texted me once after I'd called the cops on him, only to tell me that he still believed something could have happened between us that day, but I was just too scared to let myself do anything. He told me that he'd wait for the day I'd realize, just like he did, that I still loved him and that my husband was just an obstacle in our way and nothing more. He even said that he'd be willing to adopt my daughter to show how devoted he was to me and sent me his address in Canada so I could reach out to him whenever I felt I was ready. I couldn't believe that people could be this delusional, but at least he was gone. He'd used a new number to text me, so I blocked that as well, and that was it. I no longer have to deal with his bullcrap or worry about him showing up at my house unannounced again. I'm mostly happy about the fact that we didn't have to move because my daughter is so happy that she gets to stay in the home that she loves. As long as she's happy and safe, I'm okay with everything. And now that I know we're not in any danger, I'm not that worried either. We're still keeping the security measures we'd taken in place, though, just to be doubly sure. Chris and I also did read the last message that Nick had sent together. We were sitting on the couch drinking wine and watching our daughter play, and it honestly felt ridiculous that even after he'd seen my family, he still believed that I'd want him. I can't imagine how any human being can be so self-involved. I even sent Joe the text, and he had the same reaction as us. I'm still not speaking to my friend who gave him my address, though. What she'd done was very irresponsible, and as a mother herself, she should know better than that. Not only did she put me in a really tough spot, but also my family, and that's something that I just cannot forgive her for. Anyway, my husband and I are planning a trip to the beach, my daughter's favorite place, in a few weeks so that we can let some steam off, which is much needed since these past couple of weeks were really very stressful for me. I feel like I've earned a break. I've been very busy with work, as has my husband, and I'm sure this will do us a lot of good. Thank you guys for all the love and support that you guys have been sending us. Much love.